Oh, there you are. It's been an evening. I'll give everybody a minute to pop on. Sorry, I'm running a little behind here. It's been an evening. We have the wrap up going on of the Tunisian in the round tea cow. There will be one more of the hot pads coming here shortly. For December we will have one, and then we have a few other updates coming. So I hope everybody's had an opportunity to do that. I got a new notebook, and it is very fitting for the fact that we have the, I'm designing in it. Hey, Deborah! Since I'm designing in it, and there is a pattern that I'm doing that I have done more frogging than I have done the actual pattern. You know, it's so great when something comes to mind and you're like, oh, this will work out, and then you start doing it, and it's not working out to what you have in mind. So my notebook denotes lots of frogging. So, yeah, I thought frogs were appropriate for this project. I have been working on the cuffs for the sweater that I will be having here in the future. So this is my bottom cuff, and I'm still working on that. I want to finish the second 50-gram ball of yarn for this one, because that way when I have it done I can put my stitch marker in it, and then based on what I use for the swatch, then I can determine how much I'm going to need, and then I can just frog a few rows, so I'm making mine a little bit longer. Tonight's pattern is one of those patterns that is a pillow pattern. It is Barbie-esque, but with everybody being in a mood lately, I figured this one would be appropriate. It's not for everybody, but sometimes you just have to have an adult pattern. Because y'all have that one person in your life that you have that's like, this would be, I'm going to make this because this is who I think of when I use this pillow. The locker hooks. We were talking about them because we will be doing those, using those in the future. Hey, Sherry. We will be having those in the future. Move my stand closer. Sorry, guys. Give you a headache. The humidity has been up here lately, and in the weather changes, it causes issues with my chest with the high humidity. So I am starting to be very heavy, feeling that heavy feeling in my chest. So excuse me for all my coughing and drinking in the background. So the locker hooks, if you get them online, you get a 6mm, a 4mm, and a 3mm if you get these. With the locker hooks, if you're doing a nooking, your gauge is going to be a little bit different than it is with Tunisian, because you don't have the return pass to add that kind of tension to it. So for the pattern that we will be doing here shortly this fall, if you got your hooks in, you're going to need to play with your tension. Unfortunately with these If you get the metal ones, you get a 6mm and a 4mm, and there's a pretty big difference between 6 and 4 because you're missing, 5.55, 4.5. So I probably will be using the 4mm for my ribbing that we will be doing here in the future down the road. But this is going to depend on the tension that you want. When we do the ribbing, one of the big things we're going to talk about is gauge and your gauge swatch. And the same thing with the sweater that we have going on. I just had a huge debate with somebody about gauge swatches, and this is somebody that has tested for me off and on and thought that gauge really doesn't make a difference, so they worked a pattern that was not mine and tested it, and decided to skip the part where you do the gauge swatch blocked and then you measure from there. So their sweater that they just did that was supposed to be a 2X is now a 4X. So that is why a lot of times with clothing it is very important to block your swatches, especially because with cotton, when you launder it and wash it, depending on what you prefer to wash your clothes on, because not everybody washes theirs according to the yarn label. For me personally, I use the yarn label and put that permanently in the back of something that I make, unless it's for me, and then I actually have a tag that I put in my clothes that I make for myself. And with that, that tag does not have washing instructions because it's for me. So I have a little blue square cloth tag, and those I put in my sweaters that are a cold water wash, my warm water wash. I put an orange tag in, and my hot water wash, I put a red tag in. And it doesn't have the size or anything else, but if I make something and it's been in my drawer and I've worn it and I want to wear it again, and I'm going to wash it again, then I just look at that tag and then I know, what to wash it on. As far as drying, I have a piece of fabric on that fabric, and depending on how it is to be dried is how I sew that in. So I have a little square tag that I put in my clothes, and I have a method on whether it can be dried or it needs to be air dried. So for me, if my things can go in the dryer on a normal dry with regular clothes, I just leave that square a square. If it needs to be air dried, then I fold that square in half, and then I usually will stitch that. And so it's now a long rectangle, and that means that it needs to be either air dried, and it can go in air dry in the dryer just with air and no heat, or it can be laid flat to dry. So for those, I tend to have the rectangle. So for me, that's how I know the difference from my personal items. For my items that I am gifting or whatever, then I have the whole written directions in. What happens with acrylic, and we've talked about this a lot here, when you wash acrylic, according to the washing instructions, and then you dry it, acrylic will act differently depending on what you have done to it. If you take your acrylic and you steam block it, the steam from your garment steamer is hotter than the steam from a low grade dryer. And once you steam acrylic with a garment steamer, it's semi-permanent. And the reason that I always say semi-permanent Because you always have this person that you give something to, and then they decide to throw it in the dryer on the hottest setting that they can set it on, and then stuff happens to it that's not, that should not happen. Usually a medium, to normal dry will not change your blocking that you have done with the garment steamer once it's been set. Because acrylic, as everybody knows, is plastic, and plastic will react differently, and that is one of the huge things that I say about working with acrylic. Acrylic is great. I mean, a lot of the yarns are acrylic. It's super easy to get. They're super cheap, affordable yarns. A lot of the number 4 worsted weight yarns that are on the shelves are acrylic, so if you block that swatch with the steam, it is going to open those stitches up and it's going to relax them, and that heat kind of sets that permanently because it's plastic. And that is one of the reasons why I also do not like to use an iron. There are patterns that will cause that ask you specifically to use an iron and high heat to steam this project because they want you to kill the fibers. Once you kill the fibers in acrylic, there's no going back. So that is one of the reasons too why I talk about swatches and blocking them to see how your fabric is going to react to what you've done. Because a lot of people that haven't done it will block a first piece and they're like, oh no, my stitches had bounce and they were nice and pliable and fluffy. And when you garment steam, it kind of relaxes these a bit. If you use a really high heat, like a steam iron that gets too close to it, they become shiny. There's no pliable to it anymore, and it just kind of hangs there. So that is one of the reasons too that I talk about using a steam iron if you want to kill the fabric. And I like the garment steamer over that because if you're doing a blanket or a garment, it is easy to have your arm get tired because you're trying to keep a certain distance away from the project the whole time. A steam iron will get heavy. So if you're not used to that, and a lot of people nowadays are not used to ironing clothes, and that's not picking fun at anybody. With the industry and the fabrics that we have now, there's a lot less like wrinkles, and they've taken into account the washability, and that you really don't need to iron a lot of fabrics now that didn't they didn't hold up like that with some of the cottons and stuff in the past, and they did need ironed, or you went to work looking like you slept in your shirt. And so a lot of the older generation knows about ironing more than the younger, and it depends on the fibers that you're used to working with, and the clothing that you're used to working with, and what job you have too. A lot of the younger people that have business type jobs that need shirts ironed and whatnot, they either take them to the cleaners or they do it themselves. So, I'm not saying that younger people don't know, but a lot of younger people are blessed with some of the fibers that are wrinkle free, and you can just throw them in a washer, throw them in a dryer, and it'll tell you to, you can just take it out of the dryer and use it, or you could take it out of the dryer and when it's damp, and then use the garment steamer with it. It goes over all that. So so that is one of the reasons why we have doing your gauge swatch and blocking it first with wearables, because so many people take them and make them and they fit great, and then they get washed, and either the washing instructions were different on the label than how they washed them, or they just take them and throw them in with the clothes and don't take that into consideration, or they have not taken the fiber, especially in acrylic, and washed it, or blocked it with steam from the garment steamer, and then all of a sudden this acrylic has stretched and now it is huge and it's not what they wanted, and then they get upset. So with acrylics, for the most part, a lot of times you will see a pattern and it will say, you know, this one has so much ease, blah blah blah. You want your swatch blocked. So that is something that we will be talking about in the future here with this pattern that we have going on. We have the tea-cows coming up this fall. One will be one of the stockings that we will be starting here shortly. There are videos to walk you through all of that. Let's see who's on. I don't see Angela. She's got some things going on in the background with family. There is a video link for the stocking for the heel. I may need to go in and reword the stocking for the heel part. But row 37, you will go in and you place your stitch markers in, I think it's stitch 15 and 45. I'm not sure. I don't have the pattern right in front of me. But when you put those stitch markers in that row, that round, it is to see where your heel is going to be. So when you're working in the round, you will get to whatever stitch marker or stitch, put your stitch marker in, put your other stitch marker in. And then we will be using, it's almost like a knitting cast on, so you will take your yarn around your two fingers and you will make a loop and cast it on. And that skips all of those other stitches, and that creates a hole for your heel. So you will end up skipping all of those other stitches and it will create a hole for the heel, so that when you go around again and you pick all of those up or you cast off, that leaves a gap, kind of like our keyhole scarf and oh gosh, we've done a few with that. The oven scarf that we did, and my mind's drawing a blank right now about some of the other ones, but anyway, you can chain for that, but what happens when you chain is you end up with extra stitches because you have the loop on your hook and then you chain. So if you do it that way, you need to actually cast on one less because you have the loop on your hook all the way around. So when you do row 38, what you're doing is you're skipping those the ones with the stitch marker, and you're adding that, it's almost like a long tail cast on, it's a knit cast on that we're using. But anyway, you will cast on those stitches, and then when you turn your work and you do the return pass, then that sets you up for the row so that you have the hole for the heel, because later on you're going to go in where them stitch markers are. For like 15 and 45, you're skipping all of those. So when you go in and you do those later, that is going to be where you're attaching your heel to make the heel in later in the stocking that we're doing. So hopefully that makes sense. What else? So the stocking we will be doing here pretty soon. We're wrapping up the hot pads. The hot pads will stay in there for another month or two before those come down. So I do look forward to everybody having the opportunity to finish their hot pads and post those. We will have a third hot pad coming here pretty soon. The third hot pad has a separate design in it, and so yeah, we have that one that will be coming here shortly. Sweater is what I am working on designing now, and when we start the sweater, you are going to have free, it's going to be, I don't want to say a gaugeless sweater, but you guys are going to need to have your gauge swatched together so that you can, all my math is going to be laid out so that anybody can do this any size. So the size that you need is going to be based on the math that we have for this. Also, there will be a few things coming here shortly. We will have a different background that you guys will be seeing here soon. I'm excited about that. And I have a dog sweater that I'm working on right now that is going to consist of granny squares, and it is going to have 2 different kind of granny squares, and I have not got my ends weaved in yet, so forgive me, but this, even though it is not Tunisian, my sister-in-law requested a dog sweater, so these will be our granny squares that I will be doing for her little puppy. So there is a lot going on in the background since fall is here and everybody has their Christmas orders in that I'm trying to fill, and their last minute family requests that they want done. So yeah, I'm trying to get all that together. So there will be a lot of notes and a lot of frogging in my little frogging notebook with all of my notes about who has what and what's going on and how many stitches you need and what block gauge is, and the length of the arm that we need and the length of the opening in the neck that we're going to need, and so y'all are going to need to pick out your favoritist sweater, sweatshirt, cardigan that you have, and we're going to be doing math from that here shortly, probably in about a month from now. That will start, and I'm sure that y'all have your nooking hooks in, and if not, you guys can go ahead and order those. Or you can order the locker hooks. I ordered the locker hooks, and people ask what the difference is. A nooking hook usually has a small hole that is small enough to add yarn to. A locker hook has a bigger hole, and the bigger hole is because locker hooks are used to make projects that are on a almost like, what do they call it? The latch hook backgrounds with that netting, and you add your fabric through here. So you take your fabric and you fold it, and then you put your fabric through here and you pick it up, and your fabric is held in here folded. So that is why locker hooks have larger holes, because the larger the hole, the bigger the fabric that the fabric strips, and that is why nooking hooks all have like the same size hole. But a lot of people like the locker hooks to do a lot of projects because the ability to have metal. A lot of the nooking hooks are wooden, and a lot of people don't like to work with the bamboo because it's soft, and some of the ones you can get are plastic, and a lot of people don't like to work with plastic, and so if you like to work with metal, the locker hooks are kind of the way to go. And since you will be doing pretty much just a forward pass with the nooking method we are going to be using here for a project that we have going on, you don't need to go up such a large amount like you do in Tunisian. But again, that is going to depend too on the stitch that you choose to use, and the one that we are using, since you only have the forward pass, is not going to be as tight. So you can order a 5mm nooking hook, because like I said, unfortunately this comes with 6, 4, and 3, so there is a huge gap between your 6 and your 4, because you're missing the 4.5, the 5, and the 5.5mm hook. So, you know, obviously you guys can see like the difference in this hook is huge. But since you don't need such a, you don't have the return pass and it's not as dense, the smaller hook you can get away with. The larger hook you can if you are a tight crocheter, if you like a looser cuff on things, then you can use the larger hook. This is going to be one of them things that we are also going to have a little practice event, and we're going to talk about this and how to do it and what to look for and what your gauge is, and give you an opportunity to play around with it, because just like anything else, with our decals and stuff here, I don't just take you and throw you in with the sharks and be like, just swim for it and good luck. No. So there will be live sessions and everything else where we're going to talk about this and get that all going. So Sandra shared the free pattern for tonight. If you cannot open that link, you can always copy it and paste it into Google, or you could go into the group where she shares it, and then the link will be down in the comments. To get that, do not click on the video, click on the post that she makes, and then you'll see the video below. You want to go up to where she made the post. Don't click on her name, but next to it, and it will open up that, and then you can get your get into the comments there. If you click where the video is, it is going to take you back over here into the video. So does anybody have any questions about the hot pads that we're doing? Does anybody have any questions about anything that they're working on? Is anybody stuck on anything? We will also have another panel coming along with the Grinch and the back panel that we did for the pillow, because not everybody is a Grinch fan, so we have 2 panels that do not have that. One has the trees, and then we will have another one coming up here shortly too that will have a different design that will complement the front design, but it'll be 2 different designs. So when you flip it over, the Tunisian mosaic will be different on each side, and there will be more pillow panels coming. How do I cram 36 hours into 24? I don't know, but if you can figure that out, let me know. The easiest way that I have found to do that is to get everybody in your household to get out of your way and go to bed at night, and then try to cram as much crochet time as you can into that, and then it cuts into your sleep time severely, but that's what I have to do. It makes it seem like at least I got at least 2 hours more during the day that I would not have any other way. This is the first soda I've had in, I can't even tell you. I'm not a big soda drinker. Every once in a while I get in the mood for soda. But this is probably the first soda I've had in probably 3 to 4 weeks. So, there also will be a few things coming up here in the group. There will be a few polls, and for those of you that join me live, I can see who you are across the top. Your input in that poll gets a little bit more weight. So with those polls, I would appreciate if you guys could click on your answers, because even though something else may be winning, a lot of times I look at the people that are in the background here on the lives, and if I see that most of you want to do A and B is winning, it will override who wins the polls. So we have quite a few things together for the fall. Like I said, I know that everybody has Christmas things and orders and things going on. So that is why a lot of times over the holidays we do smaller items. There will be a keyhole scarf coming too. The keyhole scarf will be later this year into the fall, because that gives everybody an opportunity to work it up at their leisure, and that one will stay up for quite a while, only because with the holidays being here, not everybody has the opportunity to sit down and work all of this out, and with everybody with Christmas orders and everything else, it is so difficult to get to decals and have them done in a timely manner. So that's why a lot of the fall ones I do not have a strict guideline on, like, okay, this is going to be 6 weeks and you got to cram, 300 rows in 30 days. I don't like that, because, like I said, I know that everybody has Christmas orders and Christmas things, and trying to work and juggle the holidays and get ready for Thanksgiving and get ready for Halloween and all that is just so hard. So yeah, I try to stick away from that. So what else? So yeah, hopefully you guys have looked over your locker hooks or your nooking hooks, and got a few different sizes. Like I said, the 4mm, I am a looser crocheter, so the 4mm will work just fine for me, because you're doing a forward pass and there's no return pass, in the sense of what we're doing. It's almost like crow hooking, or that double-ended crochet where they had you using the longer hook and you would work your way through, and then you would turn, because you use a double-ended hook, you would turn your work and then you would work the stitch back the other way. So it's kind of like that, what we're going to be doing. But like I said, it's a new technique, and we all will be doing like a swatch, and I will have plenty of time in the cow to work up a couple swatches. Take your time with it. This is going to be a leisurely thing, because like I said, I know that the holidays are just not a time that everybody wants to like delve into something that is on a tighter schedule and time. So this will give you an opportunity to play around with things. But there will be an important part of this, which will be working up a swatch, and then blocking it, properly blocking it, because I just seen another cow in another group where a lady made something and did not follow the directions, it did not block the swatch, and this huge thing came out where, once she washed what she made, it was so much larger because the heat from the dryer and everything else just stretched it out. So, now she's, went back and forth with the designer. Like, this whole thing was on a Facebook page. Went back and forth with the designer about how this thing was washed and now it's not the correct size, and you added this much ease to it, and now hers has like double that, because of she didn't take into account when she made it blocking the swatch, which was written in the directions, but she skipped over that, and the designer showed where it says, you know, make your swatch and block it, but it wasn't like in bold, so she just figured she could skip it or whatever, and there was like a whole to-do on that, so like I don't want any confusion in this. We will be making something here shortly, and it will have ease to it, and your ease will play in factor to your gauge will play a factor once your swatch is blocked, because it doesn't change like gauge significantly when you take into consideration your original gauge swatch, and then once you block it, it is a little bit bigger. But when you take into account if you have like 100 stitches and then you block something, that 100 stitches can grow, you know, about 4 or 5 inches once blocked. So that is where the steam blocking comes into play, because you don't want to make something, and when you're making it and you're trying it on and you're like, oh, this is kind of tight, you know that, you know, once you block your finished project, or you wash your finished product and it goes into the dryer, that steam and the heat from the dryer is going to cause your acrylic to stretch. Then you're like, you know, when I was making this, it was tight, but then once I tried it on, after it was blocked, now it, you know, it fits. So when you're making something and you're trying, like for instance your yoke, and you're trying it on and it fits under the arms, but it's a little bit on the tight side, you know that once you get to the actual armholes or whatnot, and you are taking the blocked measurement in, that all them stitches across the back and the front will stretch. So it fits, but it's tight. Once you block, will become looser. So hopefully that all makes sense. I'm going on allergy season for fall, so a lot of times I don't make sense. We're all mad here. I confuse myself and have to read instructions like 5 times to realize I just made it harder than it is. Sherry said her cooks just came in. Yay! Yeah. Like I said, for the heel, I might need to change things. Lisa, didn't you make one of the stockings? Do you have any advice for the heel? Like I said, once you get to the video, you see the stitches that you mark, and once you mark them, when you start the next row around, once you get to that, once you get to that stitch marker for, I think it's 15 or whatever, from 15 to 45, which sounds wrong, but I don't have the pattern right in front of me. Then you do that like knitting cast on, where you wrap the yarn and connect the loops like you do in knitting for a cast on, and then that way when you work in the round, stitch markers are your friend. Yeah, she was reading it, and where it says, you know, put your stitch markers in 37 and then in 38, you know, to work the round, she was a little confused. So I think that that's maybe gonna need some better wording, maybe. But yeah, since you knit, Sherry, that cast on, whatever that's called, I don't knit. But yeah, it's like a knitting cast on, where you take the yarn and you loop it over the hook and you twist and then add the other, and you cast on that way. That way when you work in the circle, again, you have skipped all those stitches, but you still have the same stitch count, and that creates the gap for those like 30 stitches or whatever it is in the round. That creates that hole, and then later on you're going to work into those stitches when we do the heel. I hope that makes sense. I definitely will be doing something for clarity when we do the stocking. So after we have the back of the pillow panel for the Grinch pillow panel, once we have that up and we've completed that cowl for the mosaic, the Grinch cowl will actually come down. So if you guys want to do that pillow, I recommend going in and grabbing those patterns, and then the third pattern before it comes down. The third pattern, like I said, will be released more toward November, December time, because honestly, even though those are mosaic, they usually only take about 2 weeks to work up a pillow, because it's only like 80 by 80. So, you know, you can easily do like 5 rows a day in like an hour, 2 hours, you know. So, those won't be up too long. Called casting on. Yeah, like I said, I don't knit. I am terrible at knitting. I look like I'm about to joust. I have my, you know, I have the knitting needle and I'm trying to pick up my stuff, and then I've got this needle and it's always like pointed out and I'm trying to get in there. I look like I'm trying to joust somebody, so it looks very dangerous when I knit. It looks like it should be like a sport with a warning label. So, yeah, my knitting, I don't recommend watching it. Unless you're doing it for comedy. And if you're interrupting me while I'm trying to do it, it may be dangerous, because like I said, this needle ends up pointed out and I can't get the other needle in there, and it looks like it's very stabby. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm excited about some of the stuff that we're about to be starting here shortly. I am excited about fall being here too, and the cooler weather. I've never been a cool weather fan, and now that menopause is getting here, I think it's gotten hotter. So does anybody else have any questions about anything we're going on? Have you been able to find the events in the group okay? At the top of the tabs, you can scroll left and right if you're on your phone. And there is an event that says, or a tab that says events. So if you click that link, it will take you into our events. And we have several going on in the group right now, and that are still available, and we also have some that the older patterns are still in, like the Grinch, and then the hot pad one, for some reason it dated it and changed it and did all this stuff with it because Facebook updated their stuff, and it's so fantastic. So it made it a past event even though it's still going on, but Sherry said yes, but sometimes my brain goes into knitting mode and confuses me when working in Tunisian crochet. Graphghan boutique. Yeah, there are some methods that work really great that you can combine knitting methods with Tunisian, and other ones not so much. Other ones you try and it does not work so well. Doesn't look the same at all. So does anybody have any questions? Is there something you're working on that you need help with? We have new graph patterns coming out. I have several customs getting done right now. Like I said, everybody is in Christmas mode. So I'm trying to get all those wrapped up this right now, so that everybody has time to work those up for Christmas. Some of mine are pretty detailed. I have a lot of photo GANs going on. I did have several people message me about photo GANs that they ordered from other designers and then came to me because they were having problems and the other designer was not getting back with them. I can take the image that you sent the other designer and work up a whole new pattern for you, but I cannot change a pattern that another designer made for you because that's their copyright pattern. Even though it's your family member, I cannot go in and change another person's pattern. So with any of my photo GANs, I do not have, you know, we talk about broken connections here all the time, and color changes and everything else. Not all designers go in and fix those, so I cannot, I can tell you what you can do to fix those, but in the programs, a lot of designers can go in and isolate a color. So say you have, you know, 15 colors and you're working with all these different grays and they're very difficult to see. When you're designing a pattern, you can go in and click, say we're using deep gray. You can take that deep gray and turn it bright red. You can change the color. And then when you do that in your pattern, you can go in and you can zoom in and you can look and you can see where all these deep gray colors are and if they are cohesive to that area. And like you might have a deep gray thrown in way over here that there's like 3 or 4 of them and they're scattered, but it's shading, so it doesn't really take away from like an image like that needs a lot of detail, like say an eye. So you can go in and you can actually change those pixels there so that they connect, or you can change that area in the background so that like you can take them out, because since it's shading in the background, you can play around with that. Where you can't do that so much in a face or area, but you can also, like, or in the hair, a lot of times you have a lot of variated colors in hair for shading and stuff like that. When you make a pattern, you can't just take it and throw it in. You know, I see people using, I think one of them starts with a T. It's a newer design, and I see a lot of people using that. It's like Tangled or Twitter, or that's not it, but it's got a name like that. And I see a lot of people are just taking an image and throwing it in there and being like, oh, okay, this is the pattern. That is not how design works at all. There's one, it's like the Dragon Ball Z, it's like a Chinese lettering, and I just had somebody message me with that, and the person that designed it just put it into this program and then is like, hey, I got a pattern for everybody. And it's got the white and the orange and the black and then the gray for the shading is thrown in there, because when you put a pattern into a design and you don't clean it up, you get like shading, and you'll get like, sometimes you get some really odd colors thrown in there, and you have to go in and you have to clean all that up. So like if you were doing, say you wanted the letter A, and you were going to use pink for the letter A and white for the background, and you found this letter A and you copied it, pasted it, whatever, put it in your program, and then had the chart design it up from there. You're not going to just end up with that pink and white. You're going to end up with the white and the pink, and then you're going to have like grays and purples and oranges thrown in there for shading around the letter and everything. So you have to go in and you have to clean up each pixel. And I see so many designs in a lot of the tapestry crochet groups and stuff like that, where people just take this and they throw the image into a design program, and then whatever it spits out is whatever you get. And I see a lot of people talking about tapestry crochet and comparing it to Graphghans, and a graphed pattern You can use tapestry crochet, or you can use the intarsia crochet. Tapestry crochet, a Graphghan is just using a graph. The method that you use to crochet up the graph can be tapestry or intarsia. Tapestry is where you carry the yarns through each row. So say I was working on like mochila bags or whatnot. When you do those, you carry and you float that yarn through your stitches so that your bag is kind of reversible. You don't have all them floats. You can also float them in the background, which is also carrying them, which is it's still a tapestry method with the floats because you're carrying everything through. A lot of people, if you compare it to knitting, it's a fair owl because you're floating it on the inside. But if you're floating it on the inside, it still follows almost the rules of tapestry. Tapestry, you're carrying all these colors through the whole project. So you have, whether you have floats through the stitches where you crochet over them, or you're floating them along the back, it's the same thing. With a Graphghan, with the intarsia method, you're using bobbins. So in the end, your project will be reversible. It won't be as thick as a tapestry project. It won't be as heavy. I see a lot of people, there's a very prominent designer that I really love her work, and somebody bought a pattern from her, and they went into a tapestry group, and they are blowing up about this person's pattern, and I know exactly whose pattern it is because I've seen it on their page, and they will not message the designer about this, and the designer is like me. She will work one-on-one with you. She will give you whatever time she has. She will tell you, you know, hey, I gotta work from this time to this time or get my kids off to school, but I'm available. You can email me, blah, blah, blah. But this person is just ripping her pattern apart. And the reason that she's ripping her pattern apart is not because of what the designer did. It's what the person is doing. The person has bought this pattern, and the pattern it doesn't necessarily state, it states it's a Graphghan pattern, but it didn't state that it uses intarsia, and she is using tapestry for it. So she went out and she bought the amount of yarn that the pattern states, and she is about, I want to say about a third of the way into the pattern, and she's out of yarn. And the reason she is out of yarn is because when you use tapestry and you're carrying all those colors through, you have to think about it in this method is, say you've got 240 by 240 pixel count, and it takes 2 inches to do each stitch. So then you take that 240 stitches wide, 240 rows tall, you multiply the 240 by the 240, then you multiply that by 2 inches. And that is telling you how much yarn you would need for one color if you did a tapestry crochet, because you're carrying this color through the whole thing. So when you go and you look at the pattern, if it says white, it is going to have like, we're going to say like 1,000,000 yards, because I'm not doing all that math here in my head, but it's going to say, you know, for white, if you're doing tapestry, you're going to use 1,000,000 yards. For your green, you're going to use 1,000,000 yards, because it doesn't matter that there's only 400 stitches of that. You're carrying that through the whole thing, which is why a tapestry project is so much heavier. It is why it uses so much more yarn. It is why some of these tapestry blankets are considered weighted blankets or a suffocation hazard for a baby, because once you get to like 10% of the recipient's body weight as an adult or a teen, that becomes a weighted blanket, which in turn, any weighted blanket is considered suffocation for a toddler. They come with big warning labels. One of the programs that I do that's a trauma place that I design blankets for, I give my patterns to them. They work, you know, these people work them up. They can download these for free and get them. from the place that I work for, they pay you like $500 for each blanket you do. Those are weighted blankets, and you have to take into consideration what the pattern was designed for. One of my designs has like a 35 by 45 stitch count, and that doesn't seem like it would be very big, but with the blanket that this is designed for, it's using the Bernat blanket yarn, and we're using the bobble stitch. So each one of those bobbles is like 1.5 inches. So when this 35 by 45 grid is done using the bobble stitch with the Bernat blanket yarn, this thing is like 14 pounds, and it is good for like somebody 125 to 140 pounds. This thing is, you know, and I have all the math for that in all these. But that's a huge difference. So, you know, like I said, this person's losing her mind because she's not properly using the bobbins. And she's like, well, it just says Graphghan. And I was like, you know, at this point, instead of going online and bashing a designer, you need to go in and bring attention to the fact that, you know, maybe the instructions don't say that, because there is a huge, huge amount of difference in the amount of yarn used for tapestry, where you are carrying the yarn through the whole thing, which is another reason too, like mosaic. Mosaic blankets weigh more than a Graphghan, and their yarn is calculated differently because you have a black row and then a white row and then a black row and a white row. And then if there is an intarsia method used with that mosaic where you're using certain sections, you know, that amount of yarn is calculated separately. So, you know, you can't go to another designer and ask for things to be changed. I'm not saying that as designers we won't go in and say, hey, you know, I need help with this. I've contacted ABC design company and, you know, they're not answering me, or this pattern was done 15 years ago when I bought it and I can't, you know, they're not answering, blah, blah, blah. Can somebody give me some help? You know, there's a difference between doing that and then showing the whole pattern and being like, you know, this isn't working out, I'm out of yarn, they don't know what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. You don't go on and bash somebody about that. You know, most designs that I have seen from most designers specifically say that this Graphghan uses intarsia. This Graphghan uses tapestry. So it definitely says the difference, and you know, there is more to going in and making a pattern than just taking it, throwing it in, and then being like, okay, this is what this is. No, you have a lot of cleanup. You have to literally go in and zoom in and go into each pixeled area and then zoom in, stop. And
Somebody's cranky.
I am cranky. You have to go in and zoom in and create sections where you go in and you fix all of these broken pixels. You have to go in and change the colors. You have to go in, there is a lot that goes into designing a Graphghan, and then a lot of the programs, people are like, oh, well, you know, it doesn't tell you how much yarn to use. No, that's based on gauge. It's based on the stitch that you're using. It's based on the hook size that you're using. It's based on the type of crochet that you're doing. Are you doing Tunisian crochet? Are you doing regular crochet? Are you using cluster stitch? Are you using a non-cluster stitch? This is the sizing you're going to get with that. You know, are you using the diagonal box stitch? Are you using the correct hook for the diagonal box stitch? You know, a lot of people that are younger don't, you know, are like, oh, you know, it's corner to corner. The older people, you know, that learned stitches back in the 50s from books are like, you know, corner to corner isn't a stitch, it's just working on the bias. Corner to corner can be done in any stitch. And, you know, then, you know, there's groups that talk about, well, if you chain this and then do this and modify this for corner to corner, then this is the size blocks you're getting. And you'll see charts all over the internet where it's like, oh, well, you'll get a 1/2 inch block if you chain less and work less double crochets into that cluster, and the charts tell you you'll get a 1/2 inch cluster, but it doesn't say like you're using number 4 worsted weight yarn, you're using a 5mm hook. It doesn't give you any of that information. It just says, well, this is what you're going to get. No, you're not going to get that if you don't know the rest of the equation. You know, diagonal box stitch in the 50s, when it was, you know, originally used for patterns, called for a hook at least 2 sizes smaller. Again, it talked about, you know, based on the type of crocheter you are, that you wanted a hook at least 2 sizes smaller to reduce the gaps. Now people are like, well, I watched this YouTube video and I got these big gaps, and it says, you know, to chain less. Well, if you were using the right hook, then you would have such big gaps. I'm not saying there aren't modifications that you can make, but a lot of these charts that go around, you know, I've had so many people message me about corner to corner. Well, I found this chart online, and it says that if you modify it and change this and change that, and I'm new to this, and blah, 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 and I'm like, and the hook, you know, it doesn't say what hook size, or it doesn't say what weight of yarn, and it says I should get 1/2 inch clusters, and I'm getting 3/4, and what am I doing wrong? And you know, it's not that you're doing anything wrong. It's that the charts that you're getting online don't specifically go in and say, this is what weight yarn, this is what hook size you should be using. You know, so many yarns, you know, use a number 5 worsted weight or a number 4 worsted weight and a 5mm hook. You know, so if you were doing diagonal box stitch, you should be using a 4mm hook because that's 2 sizes smaller when you do it. And then they're like, well, it says that most people get 3/4 inch clusters. Well, most people are getting 3/4 inch clusters because the yarn calls for a 5mm hook, and they're doing the diagonal box stitch with that hook that's called for on the yarn label instead of, you know, going back to how the stitch was originally taught. So, you know, there's a lot of factors in play with crochet, and, you know, that's another reason, too, why we talk about lifter, rider, and yanker, the type of crocheter you are, why yarning under will change your gauge significantly. You know, I say in a lot of my videos, you know, there are stitches that call for yarning under. There are things that specifically call for yarning under, like Amy Garami, if you want a tighter stitch. And, you know, people are like, about that. You know, when you yarn over your hook, you have all of this yarn to work with. So you get a much looser gauge because you're going, you know, around the whole hook. When you yarn under, you're just picking up that little piece of yarn and pulling it straight forward. So it uses much less yarn. So, you know, that is why yarning under creates such a tight stitch, but it also gives a different look. For instance, when you use a yarn under and you're using single crochet, your stitches don't look like V's anymore, they look like X's, because the stitch makeup is completely different. And that makes a huge difference in things. And a lot of the stitches that are done, if you don't know the difference and you learned online, or you didn't have somebody sit next to you and teach you, and you're yarning under, the yarning under will use less yarn. It is much tighter. We had a member here that was having a heck of a time trying to match gauge, and we were using a J hook and they were using like a P hook to get the same gauge, and I was like, I don't understand what's going on. So we sat down and I sat with them and we did a video chat and worked across it, and I figured out what they're doing is they were yarning under, and that yarning under using less yarn was making such a squatty gauge that's why they weren't achieving gauge, is because when they learned to crochet, they learned to yarn under, and they were automatically doing that, and that's why they couldn't match gauge. So that's why a lot of my videos and a lot of my lives talk about, you know, do not yarn under in a pattern unless it is specifically called for with that stitch, because it significantly changes the amount of yarn used, the hook size needed. it's so much different because, like, if you find somebody that designs amigurumi and they're designing with a 5mm hook, and you've got somebody that's just yarning over and making amigurumi with single crochet, you know, yarn over, and they're like, this thing is so loose I can't figure out what's going on. It's because when you read the directions, you know, they're talking about how using the yarn under, so they're getting a tighter gauge. And so that person is using that and yarning under or yarning over and stating, you know, well, now I've got to use like a hook that's like 4 sizes smaller because I've got such big holes in there. If they were you know, a lot of the designers that use the yarn under will design and their patterns will call for a bigger hook because the gauge is tighter. A lot of the designers that are not using yarn under will use a much smaller hook. So they're using like a D or an F hook to make the stitch because they're not using the yarn under, and that's how they want to get that squattier gauge. So now if you're using the yarn under and using the D or F, now your project is like super, super tight and it feels like a rug. So there's a lot of different things that play in with the factors of crochet, and that is another reason why too I like having the live sessions, because then you guys can give me feedback, or having this open dialogue. You guys know from watching my videos, if you're having a problem with something, you know, shoot me a message. I might not immediately answer because I might be in the middle of something, but I will answer you. You know, I will help you in any way that I can. So I like that. That's why I like the one-on-one that we have together. So, alright, that's enough rambling about that. I am going to wrap things up for this evening. If you guys have any questions about anything, let me know. Go over and grab the free pattern for tonight. It's a Barbie-esque pattern. It's an adult pattern. So go over and grab that on my Payhip. That is a mosaic pattern for tonight. You can use the written for regular mosaic or Tunisian mosaic. They're pretty much the same, if you know how to read just the graph. But the Tunisian ones are written for Tunisian, but if you can follow the graph for mosaic, then you can follow this. So I'm going to wrap things up. If you guys need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. I look forward to seeing you guys starting the new cows. We will have the Christmas stocking coming up here pretty soon. We'll be starting that, and we have a sweater that will be coming up, and make sure you guys get your locker hooks or the nooking hooks, whichever you prefer. Like I said, I prefer the locker hooks because the hole is bigger in the background. I know in I've seen these sold on a lot of pages calling them nooking hooks, even though they're not. But like I said, a nooking hook will have a standard size hole, where a locker hook will have different size holes, because the size of the fabric that fits through the holes for locker hooking, your fabric that needs to fit through the hole is different, cut different widths. So that's why the holes are different sizes. So get these in, and let me know if you guys need anything. I will see you next time, and thank you for joining me again. Have a great night. Bye, guys.